Hey everyone, I've got a different style of video for you today. Today we're talking mana bases, how to build a functional mana base both on a budget friendly level and then how to move it up from the $5 to $25 to $50. Let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to be using two example mana bases here. We're going to be doing Azorius as a 2-color example, and we're going to be doing Jund as a 3-color example. Obviously, there are a lot more colors and variations. We're going to be using these two because 2 and 3 colors are the most typically played color pairs, and if I covered every single color pair, we would be here all day. This is just to give you an example while we walk through the framework of how to step from a $5 to a $25 to a $50 mana base. I'm also going to have these linked in Moxfield, and I will probably build out the rest of them as I get the time. All right, so starting with the 2-color, starting with Azorius, we're going to walk through what the $5 mana base looks like. This is a mana base that's perfectly playable. If you need a budget mana base for a deck, if you're trying to build a deck that's like $50 or under, or just, trying to penny pinch and you want to spend all your money on the big bombs, this is a good way to not want to spend on the mana base but still have something that really does work and won't give you any issues, something that you can also upgrade as you want to increase the deck. All right, first 2 cards, we've got 2 MDFCs. These are out of the new Modern Horizons 3 MDFCs. We've got Hydroelectric Specimen and we've got Witch Enchanter. Witch Enchanter is very, very good. It's a solid disenchant on a body. It's also an untapped land. Hydroelectric Specimen is a bit more niche. Both of these are free rolls because they can enter untapped. They do cost a little bit of life, but it's really not that big a deal in the grand scheme of Commander. Sink into Stupor is the better blue MDFC, but it's $3, so it's out of budget right now. Okay, getting to the actual lands. First off, we've got Adakar Waste. This is a solid pain land. It's very cheap right now. The pain lands, basically you use them for colorless. They don't cost you any life or anything. If you do need the color pipped, you pay 1 life. It's no big deal. You'll maybe do this 3, maybe 4 times tops in a game. It's usually very irrelevant to what you're doing. The pain lands see play anywhere from budget all the way up to CDH. These are good duels. Definitely think about including these in your decks. All right, next 3 lands we're going to talk about are Arid Archway, Azorius Chancery, and Guildless Commons. These are all bounce lands, meaning that when they ETB, you're going to scoop a land back into your hand, and they enter tapped. I know the bounce land says put a land back into your hand, but what that really reads is play this tap land, draw a card. Is that drawn card a land? Of course it is. But that's essentially how this works. This land helps you hit your next land drops, which is very important because plenty of people will play Commander. They're going to play Arcane Cygnus. They're going to play Sol Rings. They're going to play Farseek, 3 visits, you name it. All this ramp doesn't actually mean anything if you start missing land drops. The ramp is just a band-aid for when you've only hit 3 lands and you're like, well, at least I've got 4 signets on the battlefield. The bounce lands, because they let you put a land back into your hand and you don't actually lose any mana generation. Yes, it's tapped. I know you lose a little tempo there. But you don't actually lose any mana generation, so you're actually on par and you get to make that land drop next turn. Also, in the late game, because we're playing MDFCs, and while we only have a handful in the $5 mana base, we will add some more useful lands, and you can always add more if you really like MDFCs. These let you scoop those MDFCs back into your hand so you can actually play them as spells later on. I would say if you haven't played with them or you're very skeptical of the tap lands, try them out. As long as you don't play just a huge glut of tap lands, so you're having to bounce a tap land and then replay a tap land off this tap land, you're going to be just fine. Additionally, these lands do a little extra work in any deck that has white because white is the catch-up ramp color, and putting lands back into your hands means that you have less lands on the battlefield even though your mana hasn't changed. So you can play cards like Knight of the White Orchard or Archaeomancer's Map, land tax, etc. and actually hit more land drops based on your catch-up ability. After that, we've got Castle Ardenvale. This is a cheeky little include because it's super cheap, and unless you generate a body. Do you always need to generate a body? No, but it's useful in case you need to smack a Planeswalker after a wipe, or you're just trying to hold up mana and then need something to sink it into. It's basically a free roll. We don't play the other castle just because it really does nothing. I have Castle Vantress in almost all my blue decks, and I've activated it twice. Ardenvale does add a lot more value, in my opinion, than Vantress, so that's why we're going with this one. Then we've got Command Tower. Put this in every deck that isn't monocolor. You can still put it in monocolor if you like. This just lets you tap for anything that your commander is, and that's the name of the game. Exotic Orchard is up next. Now, I'll count this as a colorless slot here just because we can't guarantee it's going to tap for our colors in 2 mana, but I really like including this in case you get gifted a card and has an activated ability that you can't cast, or, whatever. It's very niche, but it's only like 12 cents, so I find it very free to include. I don't mind running this whatsoever. Next up is Glacial Fortress. This enters tapped unless we control a plains or an island. At the budget level, we've got so many plains and islands, this will always come in untapped. There may be a few times where this doesn't enter untapped, but it's few and far between. I wouldn't worry about it whatsoever. This is an easy include. Idyllic Beachfront and Irrigated Farmland are up next. These two are basically the same thing in this deck. They're tapped duels, but they have the basic types on them. So they are fetchable, which means when we upgrade the deck, we'll be able to snag these out of the deck and fix our mana. They also turn on your Glacial Fortress, so you're not just kind of stranded with another tapped land. Irrigated Farmland lets you cycle it if you don't need to hit a land drop this turn. You're just flooded out a little too much. These aren't that great, but hey, it's a budget mana base. This is what we're doing, and we're setting ourselves up for the future here with these lands. Next up, we've got your basics. We have 21 basics in this deck. It's a lot of basics, but if you've got some very cheap utility lands that you want to toss in here, feel free. Not all of these need to be basics. You'll be just fine if you swap some of these out for utility lands. I wouldn't go higher than 6 in terms of just colorless utility lands. Yeah, you can certainly ditch a few of these basics if you've got some other stuff lying around. Next, we have Myriad Landscape. This is an aggressively average ramp card. I know it comes in tapped. I know it can only fetch out 2 of the same types of basics, but hey, we're in blue and white, and we don't have tons and tons of ramp unless we're running a ton of creatures in white. That will do catch-up ramp. Plenty of people still play Myriad Landscape. I certainly don't mind seeing it when it comes up in my regular mid-level decks. Next, we have Prairie Stream. This is another type duel. I count this kind of like a half when it comes in tapped or untapped. We're running so many basics in the budget version of this mana base, though, that this is probably going to be an untapped duel, and it's only a few bucks. So, hey, that's pretty nice. Next, we've got Skycloud Expanse. This is a signet land. Basically, this lets you put a mana into this, and you can get Azorius colors out of it, so it effectively just taps for 1 mana. You just need to have another land. This works really well with the 2 bounce lands that we're running in this deck, the Guildless Commons and the Arid Archway, because those only tap for colorless, and sometimes you need some colors, so you can dump some of that into this land and get some nice colored pips out of it. It's a solid include for sure. And finally, rounding out the land base, we've got Temple of Enlightenment. This just ETBs taps for both colors, and you get to scry 1. The temples are great. I always put the temples, even if it's a mid-level deck, I'll play a handful of temples. A little less so now that we have the Surveil lands, but I still love seeing the temples. Turn 1 temple, scry 1 is really strong. Don't underestimate the powers of early level scry, surveil sort of effects to make sure you're hitting a land drop or what have you. So some stats for the $5 mana base. We've got 9 duels, which is plenty. We've got 4 colorless cards, which isn't that big of a deal. And we've got 9 tap lands. Once you start getting over 10 in that 12 to 15 range of tap lands, that's when your mana starts to feel really clunky. At 9, if you've got the right curve and you've got plays to make at certain mana values, as long as you design around it, 9 is not a big deal whatsoever. So now we're moving to the $25 mana base. We got a clean 20. What are we going to spend this on? Well, only a handful of things, and really only a couple things. So one, we're going to add a Scavenger Ground. This is Graveyard Hate. We should be running it. It's not going to be our job at the table at $5 mana bases to do that, but at $25, let's run a little Graveyard Hate in our deck to make sure that we can account for some of those decks that like to use Graveyard as their extra hand. What we're spending the bulk of our extra $20 on are a Flooded Strand and a Windswept Heath. Now, in case you don't know, Windswept Heath, while looks green and white, doesn't actually have any colors, so we can totally play both in our Azorius deck, and it's fine. If you don't want to do that because you like keeping all the colors matching, fair, good for you, awesome, carry on. Swap in your Hallowed Fountain here instead. You can kind of make it work. So adding the 2 fetch lands and the scavenger grounds, we're just pulling out 3 basics. We're pulling out an island and 2 plains. So with the 2 fetch land adds, this is where the mana base is really going to start feeling a lot better. Since you can search up these duels, this is really like adding 2 extra duels to the deck. They're also just a really great investment just overall in terms of mana base. You can put the fetch lands in literally any deck. Obviously, they're only going to work in 7 color pairs out of 10. This is a great place to spend your money if you're trying to be frugal with your mana base money. 2 fetch lands, this is awesome. If you ever take this deck apart, more than likely you will be able to use these fetch lands in your other decks. So this feels good. This is a nice, easy include, nothing too crazy here. Yes, we're just buying a couple fetch lands. Okay, we're bumping it up again. We're going to $50. What are we doing here? Well, we're going to add a demolition field. This is going to hate out any people that are doing some cheeky land stuff like their Nykthos, or if they've got a creature land or what have you. We've got a little insulation versus that. Then we're going to add 2 more duels. We're adding the Hallowed Fountain here, and we're adding Meticulous Archive. With the addition of these 2 duels, we're going to drop the Idyllic Beachfronts. Thank you, Beachfront. You did us proud. You were searchable back at $25. But now we've got enough duels that we want to be hunting for with our fetch lands that we don't need, you know, a 4th, 5th type duel. So we're going to ditch the Idyllic Beachfront. So what these 2 new duels let us do is basically search if we need an untapped duel, we can snag the Hallowed Fountain, and if we needed a little extra value, we can snag the Surveil land, which lets us, you know, kind of sculpt the very top of our deck just a little bit. It's not a ton, but I really like these lands. Plus, you only ever need 1 in any deck, just, you know, to get that value. Here we're also adding Mystic Sanctuary and Sink into Stupor. Sink into Stupor is probably the best MH3 MDFC. Sorry, that's a lot of word abbreviation soup thrown at you. But it's probably the best MDFC we got in Modern Horizons 3. It's basically a counter spell or a bounce spell on a land. So it's free, essentially, because you can just play it as a land and it can come in untapped as well. That's really great. Mystic Sanctuary is really nice because it basically lets you put a spell that you wanted to use, which you're in blue, so you probably want to use your spells again, like a counter spell or you have a draw spell, whatever you want to do. If it's in your graveyard, you can put it at the top of your deck. If this card enters untapped, we have enough way to search for islands and have enough islands in the deck that we can support Mystic Sanctuary pretty easily. And all we have to do is just take out a handful more basics. We're still running plenty. The deck feels pretty good at this price point. I think we still come in a little under, so if you want to add some other stuff, that's totally fine as well. Okay, so we've got the $50 mana base. I'm real happy with this. I know it's pretty generic, but that means you can kind of port this around to any other Azorius deck that you want, and any additional money you'd want to spend on this, you know, you can get some nicer duels, some, you know, ones that you know will untap most of the time, like a Battle Bond duel or a slow land, but you can also spend that money on more niche cards that are more synergistic with what the deck is trying to do, more thematic lands, that kind of thing. You know, if you're running an artifact deck and you want to add an Academy Ruins or Inventor Fair, that kind of thing. If you're running a deck that really doesn't want to get attacked, you can toss in your Maze of Ith, that kind of stuff. Okay, next up we've got Jund. We've got the 3-color mana base. Let's see what's going on here. First up, we've got 3 monocolored MDFCs from MH3. These are solid. We've got Graveyard Hate, we've got Card Draw, we've got Graveyard Recursion. So all of these, awesome, probably pretty generic. Cut them if you're not going to be doing one of those 3 things, but you probably will want them. And as I said before, they're pretty much free in terms of land base. Then we've got another MDFC. This one is a tap duel. It's in green, which is important. When you're in green, typically all your ramp revolves around having green mana available. So we want as many of our duels to be green if possible. And this is a solid, easy 1 mana, save your commander, save someone else's creature in a cheeky play. We don't want to run all of the tap duels from MH3 just because that's how you clunk up your mana base with too many tap duels. So we're just going to run this one and it's pretty solid. Moving into the lands, we've got Canyon Slough starting it off. This is a typed duel that you can cycle away. It's solid if we want to fetch for it later on as we upgrade the mana base. But in case we flood out, this gives us a little insurance and it's just a tap duel. No big deal here. Command Tower, you know it, you love it. It's an easy, free add. You close your eyes, don't think about it. Put a Command Tower in your deck. They cost nothing. Next, we've got Demolition Field. We're featuring this one just a little earlier on, as it does technically help you fix. If you're in dire straits, you can blow someone else's land up and you can get a basic if you need to do that. Probably not going to do that. It's just land hate, but it's here. It's 50 cents, so that's why we're putting it here at the $5 level for the Jund mana base. Next, we've got Exotic Orchard. This one probably will tap for a color that you need in 3 colors and gives you all that tangential goodness that I discussed earlier. So yeah, again, 12-cent solid include here. Then we're going to cover all the basics. We've got 7 of each. We got 7 forests. We got 7 mountains. We got 7 swamps. Woo, buddy. That is a lot of lands. That is a lot of basics. Again, if you need some extra utility in here, feel free to cut a couple of these, but that's where we're at when it comes to a $5 mana base. Next up, we've got 3 bounce lands, but we're not running Arid Archway or Guildless Commons because when we're in 3 colors, we have access to all 3 of the colored bounce lands. So we're playing Golgari Rot Farm, we're playing Gruul Turf, and we're playing Rakdos Carnarium. I love the bounce lands. I've espoused as to why you should be playing the bounce lands. They're really awesome. Obviously, we're even more juiced up with MDFCs here, so you get a bunch of extra value from them there. Really strongly consider putting these in your decks. That's why they're in this one, and that's why they're in this mana base. Next, we've got Sheltered Thicket. This is the same exact card as Canyon Slough. It's a tap type duel that lets you cycle it. Then we're playing all 3 temples in these colors. I know it's a lot of tap land, but hey, getting that extra value off your tap lands because you can't get a lot of duels at this price that aren't going to be tapped. Being able to fill to the top of your deck is hugely important to make sure that while your land may be a little clunky, the rest of your draws aren't going to be. Finally, we're finishing this up with Twisted Landscape. This is a better Evolving Wilds. MH3 came out with these fixing lands for limited, but they're very good in every triple color deck. So this lets you cycle it for Jund colors. It lets you tap and get a basic in any of those colors. And you can just tap it for colorless mana. So you don't actually have to sack this and fetch and go get a basic that comes in tapped. You can just use it as a colorless land if your fixing is solid already. So no need to go through all those hoops. You can just have a land. But if you do need to fix, it's there for you. Bumping up to 25 bucks, we're doing the same exact thing that we did for the 2-color deck. We're buying 2 fetch lands, baby. Obviously, even better when you're in 3 colors. These let you get any type of fixing you need to get done, or if you just need to get a basic, you can just get a basic. These are great. We're just ripping 2 basics out and we're putting 2 fetch lands in. This is what you should spend your money on if you're going from $5 to $25. Plus, as I said before, these can go in any deck, so you're really not losing any money here when it comes to building a mana base. This is easily transferable credit. So $50, we're pulling out the Canyon Slough. We're pulling out 2 of the temples, and then we're pulling out 2 basics as well. Why? We've already got enough tap lands in this deck. We need to kind of pare back on the tap lands, make it a little more well-oiled. And what are we going to add in here? Well, we're going to add in Karplusan Forest, which is a pain land. We would have done this earlier, but Karplusan Forest is actually like $3, so it would have eaten all of our $5 budget. And we wanted to buy 2 fetch lands more than we wanted a Karplusan Forest. So that's why it's coming in now. It's a solid, great land. Obviously, if you have one, play it. Again, these see play all the way to CEDH, so definitely run them if you got them. Now is when we had the space and the budget to add it, so we're adding it now. We're also adding Sulphurous Springs for the same reason. It's a pain land, same exact reason. We just had space in the budget now, so it's a solid duel to put in here. After that, we're going to add our Shockland, and we're going to add a Surveil land. For the Shockland, I chose Overgrown Tomb because a lot of times we want to have that green mana up and available for use for plenty of other things, especially ramp at the beginning, so it's pretty useful for the green mana to be untapped. But for the Surveil land, I went with Raucous Theater just because it was the cheapest, and we didn't mind if this land comes in tapped. We don't care if these colors come in tapped. We don't need to fetch it all the time. And it's nice to have that little extra surveil value if we do in fact need it. Finally, we're adding Scavenger Grounds, so you can check that box to say you are a good commander player who is doing your civic duty, where you are running some amount of Graveyard Hate, 1, and some amount of Land Destruction, again, 1. But that's enough to check the box and say that you are a responsible commander player. These mana bases should run nice and smooth, no issues here. And again, I'm going to be posting all of these on Moxfield once I finish. Not just the Azorius and the Jund ones are finished, but I'm going to finish up all the other color pairs. So you have a nice resource so you can go look at and be like, oh, hey, you know, these are land bases, and you know, this is the budget I'm working with. So you can kind of just plug and play and make changes as you see fit. But now I want to know in the comments, what do you think? Would you run these land bases? What lands did I leave off that are must includes in your opinion? Let me know down below. As always, thank you for liking, thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you for the next video.